come again to the Hebrew point of view. How do I know God?
Yeah.
We have all these sayings that we use sometimes without even thinking. Like, oh, is he still serving God?
Yeah.
Well, what does that even mean?
Yeah. How do I get closer to God?
Getting closer to God, or I'm searching for God.
Yeah. Or I want more of God.
Yeah.
I mean, all these little cliches that we continually use.
But what does all this actually mean? And we do put things in terms that we can understand. In other words, we express ourselves in terms that we can relate to. But that doesn't always answer the question that we're asking, and that is, how do I know God?
Okay, well, let's go back and just talk about where we came from, what our journey has been. We've been in the ministry. Well, I was brought up in the ministry as a kid. My dad was a minister, and when I met you, you eventually got into the ministry as well. Went to theological college, etc., etc. But we were in a specific denomination, and I guess we learned all that denomination taught us.
Mm-hmm.
Never dared to question that, because it wasn't done to question anything like that. And then we met Dr. Blizzard through he came to minister at our church in South Africa, and you've been in touch with him ever since. So when you were questioning something one day in church, you said, "I'm going to find out the truth of this," and that's where pretty much the journey started and began. So tell us a little bit of what you felt like, especially being a minister yourself, and your experiences. You pretty much, I know that you didn't think you knew it all, but in some respect you do think you know something.
Well, you do get that arrogance or that presumption where we think, I know it all. Not at all. I know enough to understand what my Christianity is all about, so don't try and change me, don't try and change the things that I believe. And this is a problem that a lot of people face. Some people listen to what we talk about and they must think, these people are probably heretics. They're thinking so differently. And by the way, the word heretic came out of the great persecution after Constantine had established what it was to be a believer with at the Council of Nicaea and the Council of Chalcedon. They said, this is what you have to do to be a believer or a Christian. And if you didn't do that, or if you thought outside of those thoughts, you were considered to be a heretic. And the word heretic just simply means someone who thinks differently. And then in brackets, with reference to your religion.
So basically we actually don't mind being heretics.
Yes, but it's a problem because, our religion, our faith in God is probably the most important thing to us. And when that is questioned or when that is threatened, it's disconcerting to us.
Yeah.
And we put up our defenses because we have been indoctrinated all the way since the 4th century that if you dare to question these things, you're going to lose your salvation. Remember that word that they introduced, excommunication. Cast out of the church. Cast out of your inheritance.
Yeah.
Cast out of salvation. It was a horrible thing, and so we conformed in order to preserve what we called our salvation. And that was a problem. And so when you and I were faced with questions that the church was not answering for us, this is kind of how I felt. I remember going to one of Dr. Roy Blizzard's lectures, and he invited me. It was in Austin, Texas. We flew from Virginia, hired a car. It cost us a lot of money, hotels, cars, and I walked in there, and everybody sitting around, they had their computers out, had their Hebrew Bibles, reading it in Hebrew. I didn't understand even what an aleph was. I didn't know the first thing about Hebrew. I just knew that Hebrew was a language that I should have studied, but I didn't. because the denomination in which I studied said it's no longer necessary to understand or to know Hebrew and Greek. Big mistake. But anyway, so these guys are all sitting around there reading their Hebrew Bibles, and they've all got doctorates and they've got master's degrees, and I'm sitting there and basically totally out of my depth. And Dr. Blizzard walks in and he sits down at his desk in the front, and he said this, he said, "If you are not prepared to change what you believe, then you may as well get up and leave this conference right now, because you're wasting your time." And I was totally offended. And I thought, how presumptuous of this man, how arrogant that he could dare to say that. I've spent all this money, I've come all this way to come and study, I want to learn, and he's telling me that if I'm not prepared to change, then I may as well leave. And I didn't want to make a fool of myself, so I said, well, I'm going to sit here, and at the break, when everybody's taking a break and having coffee, I'm just going to disappear. I'm going to call you at the hotel, and I'm going to say, come pick me up, we're leaving. And so I sat down, and Dr. Blizzard opened up his Bible, and he began to read in Hebrew, and I was totally intrigued by that. And then he began to speak, and he began to talk about concepts and understandings and this incredible rich Hebrew language that I knew nothing of, and I was totally captivated. And I just, I was hanging on his words. I forgot about my offense that I felt. I forgot about all of the decisions to leave this conference and just go home. And I just realized, you know what? There's something here that I don't know. And I want to know.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to stop until I do know.
Yeah. And I think you have to have that in you in order to gain knowledge. Because if you're satisfied with where you are, that's it.
Well, what is the purpose of knowledge?
Well, it's to get better, to gain gain insight into what you, especially into what we believe and what we know.
The purpose of knowledge is to increase what you know. But when you increase what you know, you have to change the way you think. The problem is, there's actually two problems. One is we increase our knowledge, but we don't want to change what we think. The other is we are selective in the knowledge that we seek. And so we go and try to study all of the things that seem to agree with our current belief system. And so we're not exploring anything new, we are just
exchanging the one for the other.
We're not exchanging anything. We're just strengthening the views that we have. We're finding people that would support what we believe, and we're saying, well, you see, there's an intellectual, he supports what I believe, therefore I must be right.
And that's not true.
No. I did something that was really interesting for me, is I started listening to debates between Jewish archaeologists of different points of view. And I listened to these two archaeologists coming from different points of view, coming from different orientations, debating Torah. And I realized that there is more than just my point of view. And in order for me to understand more about God and to know God, I need to start knowing more about the Word.
So it's not really about being right.
It's not about being right. What are we doing with these discussions? We're not trying to convince you to think like us. We're not trying to proselytize you. We're not trying to build a church or get you to give money. All we're doing is trying to stimulate the thought processes within you that will lead you to a better understanding of who God is.
Give you another side.
This is the road that we traveled.
Yeah.
And it gives you an understanding of who God is. If you dig into it, if you start studying, if you start reading different points of view. You know, one of the greatest criticisms that intellectuals have against, one, the church, and two, just generally against believers, and that is that we reject the intellectual sciences. We reject archaeology, we reject history, we reject science.
If we even go that far.
And we simply and naively interpret everything within the confines of not of the Bible, but of our understanding of the Bible. And our understanding of the Bible comes from those who have taught us. And those who have taught us get their understanding from those who have taught them. Unfortunately, we've had a trend in the church and amongst believers for intellectual studies to be taboo. I know when I was at Bible college within my denomination, we were not even given books to read and compare. We were just given notes prepared by the denomination. So I was fed their way of thinking. And when I came out of that, I remember I was assistant pastor to your father. And when I came out and I said to him, I've got my certificate, I've accomplished something, I've now come through Bible school with flying colors. Do you remember what he said to me? He said, everything that you learned at that Bible college, you could write on the back of a postage stamp. And then he pointed to his library. I was standing in his study looking at all of his books, and he says, this is where you're going to get your knowledge.
Yeah.
And if you're prepared to read and prepared to study, you're going to discover.
Yeah.
So let's just break away from the tack that we're on, and let's talk about Dr. Roy Blizzard just for a while, because this is important to us, because he has been our mentor. Very important, we chose to have a mentor, to have someone that would oversee what we believe. And
well, also that has the, obviously he has the knowledge, which is what we're talking about now.
So when we have questions, what's the first thing we do? I get on the telephone and I call Dr. Blizzard and say, listen, what do you think of this? In the process or in the course of the 30 or 30 odd years that we've known him and been studying under him, he's introduced me to other people that I also call. And why Dr. Blizzard? Number one, because he has studied, he's done the work, he's done the study, he's been in Israel, he's dug on the excavations.
Yeah. Just to enhance on that, he has a BA from the Phillips University with a major in religion. He has 2 different master's degrees, one in archaeology, anthropology, and religion from Eastern New Mexico University, and the other in Hebrew studies from the University of Texas in Austin. Finally, he also has a PhD in Hebrew studies at the University of Texas. And besides that, he also went on a lot of archaeological digs in Israel.
Yeah, he worked under the great archaeologist Benjamin Mazar.
Yeah, I mean,
he excavated at the Temple Mount,
right.
And they excavated the mikvaot that go up the sides of the temple, the monumental staircase, mikvaot, the baptismal baths, the ceremonial baptismal baths that lined the monumental staircase leading up to the temple. Yeah. Dr. Blizzard was there with Dr. Benjamin Mazar excavating those mikvaot.
Which also got him immersed in the culture.
Well, not only in the culture, but in the way the archaeologists were thinking. They were digging up artifacts. They were discovering new things. Remember, these are all Jews, and their traditions have come from thousands and thousands of years of not only of oral conveyance of Torah and the stories of Torah, but also of all of the discussions and arguments amongst the sages that are recorded in Mishnah and Talmud. They are all part of these people's lives, and here they are digging up new stuff, finding new facts. And most important, these men are changing the way they think.
Yeah. And it's changing all the time, even today.
It changes all the time.
Yeah.
They're changing the way they think about their religion.
Yeah.
And this is a great example for us. You know, we need to learn and we need to be prepared to change the way we think about our relationship with God.
The real element that we need to talk about, and that is the Hebrew part of the culture of that Jesus was immersed in. And I say that because we as South Africans have our own culture. We're born and bred as South Africans, just like an American is born and bred an American, or whoever else is in their country. You have certain cultures, you have certain sayings, you have a certain way of living that if I had to speak to somebody from another country, they may not, and I have experienced that, they don't understand my terminologies.
No, because you speak your culture.
Exactly. So this is the thing about the Hebrew culture. We keep on saying you have to understand Hebrew, and I want the viewers to understand why we keep saying that. It's not that we're trying to push Hebrew onto you, it's we're trying to get you to understand that there is a different way of thinking when you are from a different culture. So when there are scriptures in the Bible that are said or are written about, we don't understand it because we don't understand the culture. And this is why we keep on putting out books like this, the one that we just put out from Dr. Roy Blizzard, to understand the sayings in the Bible that are and have Hebrew origin. This is what's important.
But, you know, I know people get threatened when we say you've got to learn Hebrew. You don't have to know Hebrew. I mean, I've been studying Hebrew and learned how to read Hebrew, but I don't speak it. I'm not fluent in Hebrew. In fact, my Hebrew is horrible. But I know enough to go to my Strong's Concordance, look up the Strong's number, go to a Hebrew lexicon, and understand how my Hebrew words are formed, and understand how the root words affect the understanding of those words.
Yeah.
And I think as we come back in our next segment, let's talk about that. And let's talk a little bit about understanding Hebrew and how just a normal person, just you sitting out there listening to this, can have enough knowledge to understand what the Hebrew is saying, and get immersed in some of the books and listen to people that explain the culture. Read history. Don't reject history. One of the greatest things I ever did was study the history of Israel. Because it opened my mind to so many new things. That's enough for this segment, but let me just say thank you for watching. Share this with other people in your social media network, and please click on the subscribe button, and then you will get all of these discussions as we post them up on YouTube. So thanks for watching. Shalom.
And just as a note, we are and will be talking a lot about the book that we've just put out, A Hebrew Understanding of the Difficult Passages in the Bible. And this is just an example of what we're talking about, because this is the expounding of the scriptures.
And the information is on the screen, and you can just see it, and you can pick up your copy of that book. So thanks for watching.
God bless.
Shalom.